My name is Sheryll Carter. I'm 33 years old. And this is the story of how my husband chose his mistress on our anniversary, and how I chose champagne, silence, and a revenge so sharp it sliced the life he built in half. It was supposed to be a celebration, the kind of evening you imagine when you still believe in the magic of marriage. The 8th anniversary of the night I married Ryan Carter, a man I had once believed was the love of my life. A man I built a future with. A man I trusted so completely that I didn't see the betrayal coming until it shattered me, not with screaming, not with slamming doors, but with a single text. The night had been planned for months. I had orchestrated every detail like a symphony, not just as his wife, but as a chef, a curator of memories. I owned Blue Orchard, the restaurant I had poured my soul into for 6 long years, and I had reserved table 8 for us, the one with the sweeping view of Beacon Square, where the winter lights twinkled like hope itself. I wore an emerald silk dress, because Ryan once told me it made my eyes look like spring. I pinned back my hair with the snowflake-shaped clip he'd given me on our first Christmas, something delicate and sincere. And I smiled at the mirror, still hopeful. Still so blind. The menu was handcrafted, 6 courses, each one inspired by a moment in our love story. The honey-glazed sea bass we'd eaten on our first trip to Nantucket, the truffle risotto from the night he proposed, the exact champagne we popped when we bought our first apartment. Everything was perfect until my phone buzzed. I have to change tables tonight. I'm here with my colleague Sabrina. Please understand. I'll make it up to you another night with something really special. For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared at the words like they were written in fire. Then, slowly, I looked up. And smiled, a different kind of smile. I walked back into the dining room, my heels quiet against the polished wood floor, and sat at the bar. Nick, my bartender, and one of the few people who had seen me build this restaurant from nothing, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I only whispered, champagne. The view of Clickwat. He placed the glass gently in front of me. I didn't drink it. I just watched the bubbles rise and burst, like the illusion I had lived in for too long. And then I saw them. Ryan. Sabrina. At my table. He pulled out her chair. Whispered something. She giggled. And then I saw it. The bracelet. My grandmother's diamond bracelet. The one I wore on our wedding day. The one that was passed down from Lucille Thompson, the woman who taught me that survival wasn't about how strong you looked, it was about how quietly you endured, and how loudly you came back. And now that bracelet, my family's legacy, was on the wrist of a woman sitting in my restaurant, laughing with my husband. I felt like I was drowning in air. But I didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. I asked for another glass. That's when I noticed him. A man, mid-30s, tense, gripping his whiskey like it was the only thing holding him together. His eyes locked on the same table. Our table. And there it was, a glint of shared pain. The look of someone who had been dragged into this betrayal against his will. I leaned toward Nick. Is he a regular? Nick shook his head. First time I've seen him. I stood up. Walked over. My voice low, calm, steady. Are you also watching that table? He turned to me, and his words were a dagger I didn't expect. My name's Lucas Bennett. The woman sitting there, Sabrina, is my wife. I almost collapsed. Instead, I smiled. I'm Sheryll. The man beside her is my husband. And just like that, without saying another word, we understood each other completely. We sat. Side by side. 2 strangers bound not by fate, but by betrayal. Lucas told me Sabrina had claimed she was at a business meeting with a female colleague. I told him Ryan said the same thing. And right there, under the lights of Blue Orchard, we watched our partners unravel their own lies. That's when we saw Sabrina slip Ryan an envelope. Subtle. Hidden beneath the white linen. Lucas's hands trembled. Why would she give him that? He whispered. I stared, slowly replacing the storm in my chest. I don't know. But I intend to find out. Lucas unlocked his phone. Logged into his company's financial accounts. He was CEO of the Bennett Group, a construction empire built by his grandfather. Sabrina had taken over accounting last year, to help during the crisis, he said. He never doubted her. Until now. And when he saw the transfer logs, his hands stopped moving. 3 wire transfers. $50,000 total. All to a civic progress fund under Ryan's name. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a love affair. This was fraud. Embezzlement. Betrayal at a scale I hadn't even imagined. But I didn't break. Instead, I said, we gather proof. Then we burn the house down. Lucas met my eyes. And nodded. Lucas and I sat there in silence, our thoughts racing faster than either of us could articulate. The weight of what we'd just uncovered settled between us like wet cement. He stared blankly at the transfer records on his phone while I kept my eyes fixed on the table where Ryan and Sabrina shared smiles as if they hadn't just detonated the ground beneath our feet. But they didn't know they'd been seen. And that ignorance was our advantage. I leaned in slightly and whispered, we need more than transaction records. We need evidence. Real evidence. The kind that can't be explained away. Lucas nodded, his jaw clenched. My phone's got a solid mic. If we're lucky, we'll catch them saying something they can't walk back from. He opened his voice recorder app and set the phone subtly on the bar, angling it toward the table. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted it, but his face had changed, no longer full of disbelief. Just purpose. Just then, Nick returned with a small dish of bar nuts and glanced quickly between the two of us. He knew something was wrong. He had always been observant, the kind of person who noticed when a guest's shoulders tensed at a certain dish, when a couple sat in silence for too long, when a chef looked like she was trying not to shatter. He leaned down discreetly. Sheryll. I asked Sam to swing by. He's posted a security guy near the back door. You okay? I looked him in the eye. Ask him to have 2 staff near table 8. Unobtrusive. I'll explain soon. Nick gave a short nod, then slipped away like smoke. Meanwhile, Lucas scrolled further through his company's records, and what he found turned his face pale. There's another one. 5,000. From last week. And, oh God. He tapped the screen. This one's labeled under campaign consulting fees. There is no campaign. Not officially. Not yet. I took a sharp breath. Ryan had always floated the idea of running for city council, but it was just that, a fantasy, a cocktail party topic, a maybe in 5 years conversation. I never knew he was actually preparing, let alone using someone else's money to do it. He's laundering through her company, Lucas muttered. Or mine, technically. They're doing it all right in front of us, I said. Using the name of love to cover a crime. Lucas laughed bitterly. If it weren't so personal, I'd be impressed. But I wasn't laughing. My heart was pounding like a drum in my chest, and yet my mind was sharp, clear in a way it hadn't been for months. I had mourned the distance in our marriage. I had blamed myself for the coldness. But now? I saw it all. Ryan hadn't been growing distant. He had been redirecting his affection and his ambition toward someone else. And he had been stupid enough to do it on my turf. Then came the envelope. From the corner of my eye, I saw Ryan shift in his seat and reach into his jacket. He pulled out the envelope Sabrina had handed him earlier and slipped it open under the table. I turned to Lucas, whose eyes narrowed as he adjusted the phone ever so slightly, praying it would catch the conversation. I could just barely make out Ryan's voice, low and smug. This should cover the next few meetings. You said the event space needs deposits? Sabrina smiled and nodded, already booked. You'll look like a polished, serious candidate. Nobody will question the funding. I even printed the receipts. I closed my eyes for just a moment. That was it. He wasn't just betraying me. He was building his campaign off stolen funds and stolen love. And still, he sat there like he deserved every bit of applause that would come with it. Lucas leaned close. Do you trust your lawyer? With my life, I whispered. She's a shark. She already filed papers for asset separation just in case. She doesn't miss. Lucas exhaled. Then it's time we make this legal. He pulled out his phone and began drafting an email to his company's internal counsel. I texted my lawyer one sentence. Get ready. The fireworks start tonight. Then, I texted my assistant manager to quietly bring the restaurant's night security lead to me. Keep it discreet, I wrote. But have eyes on table 8. We'll need statements later. At that moment, Ryan and Sabrina clinked glasses, smiling again like villains in a bad movie. I couldn't help but glance at her wrist one more time, my grandmother's bracelet still resting there, like a cruel joke. That was when I knew. I wouldn't wait. They had taken enough. I stood up slowly, adjusting the hem of my emerald dress and smoothing my hands down the silk. Lucas followed, tucking his phone into his pocket and nodding toward the servers who'd been subtly watching table 8. As we approached, I saw the flicker of confusion in Ryan's eyes. Then the mask went up. Sheryll, he said smoothly. You look stunning. I didn't realize you were off tonight. Not off, I said coolly, pulling out the chair beside him and sitting down. Just redirected. Sabrina stiffened visibly. She tucked her wrist under the tablecloth. Too late. Lucas sat beside me, his expression unreadable. Sabrina, he said. Nice to see you. Or should I say, interesting to see you. Ryan blinked. What's going on? He asked, still trying to maintain control. Sheryll, is something wrong? I pulled out my phone, opened the photo of the bracelet's clasp, and placed it in front of them. The engraving, Lucille T., Boston 1954. I believe that belongs to me, I said softly. Sabrina looked down. Ryan cleared his throat. It just looks similar to. No, I said. It is identical. Because it is mine. The one I wore on our wedding day. The one passed down from women who survived wars and hunger and heartbreak. I turned to her. And you wore it to lie. Sabrina's eyes brimmed with tears. I didn't know. You knew, Lucas cut in, voice like iron. Just like you knew how to sign my name on internal transfer documents. Just like you knew how to lie to my face and use my family company to fund this mess. Ryan's face drained of color. What are you talking about? He snapped. There's no proof. Lucas reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed play. Ryan's voice came through clearly, followed by Sabrina's. This should cover the next few meetings. I watched Ryan's confidence evaporate in real time. His throat worked hard as he looked between us. Sabrina's hands shook. She looked ready to disappear. You recorded me? Ryan gasped. This is entrapment. No, I said, standing slowly. This is your downfall. Just then, 2 restaurant security staff approached silently. Sam, our head of security, stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. I turned to him. Ensure the check is paid. Then make sure these 2 don't leave until we give the signal. And tell the kitchen, hold dessert for table 8. Indefinitely. Ryan's face twisted in fury. You can't do this to me. You'll ruin everything. Lucas stepped forward, cold and composed. You already did that. And as the room's attention shifted to the commotion, as the quiet clicks of hidden phones began recording, I finally felt the first wave of justice wash over me. But this wasn't the end. This was just the moment they realized the game had changed. And we were the ones holding the board now. The air in Blue Orchard had shifted. It no longer carried the warm, delicate scent of roasted duck or freshly cracked creme brulee. No, now it hummed with tension, suspicion, the quiet crackle of justice being served. Every pair of eyes in the room had subtly turned toward our table. Diners tried to appear uninterested, but the truth? You could feel it, people holding their breath, watching the carefully constructed lives of two polished imposters fall apart. Ryan sat like a man trying to rebuild a house during a hurricane. His hands gripped the tablecloth as if it could save him from the avalanche he'd triggered. Sabrina looked like she was shrinking in her chair, her mascara beginning to smear from tears she wasn't even trying to hide anymore. But Lucas and I, we stood tall. Not because we were untouched, but because we were finally done playing the part of the fool. "I suggest you pay the bill," I said to Ryan quietly, motioning toward the untouched leather folder with the check still inside. "You wouldn't want your final moment here to be escorted out for theft on top of fraud." "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "Not in front of all these people. Not with your reputation on the line." I gave a soft, cold laugh. "Reputation? You mean the one I built from nothing? The one you tried to stand on like it was yours?" Ryan looked toward the security staff, then back at Lucas and me. "You don't know what you're doing. This will blow back on both of you." Lucas stepped closer, placing a manila envelope on the table. I hadn't seen him grab it from the bar earlier, but it was ready, like he'd come tonight expecting a war, and not a dinner. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Lucas said calmly. "This contains the bank transfers, the audio recordings, and screenshots of internal emails you and Sabrina exchanged. I've sent copies to my attorney, to my board, and, as of 5 minutes ago, to the local district attorney's office." Ryan's jaw twitched. "You're bluffing." Lucas didn't blink. "Am I?" A pause. A long one. Sabrina reached into her bag, trembling, and fumbled for a card to pay the bill. As she did, a handful of papers fell out, again. Among them, a printed spreadsheet labeled Internal Operating Discretionary Funding, and I recognized the name of one of Lucas's subcontractors. A red flag I'd seen before, when Ryan had casually mentioned helping a friend win a bid. Ryan lunged forward to grab the paper, but I was faster. I snatched it off the table, eyes scanning the details. "This is how you got into our kitchen upgrade bids," I said slowly, ice rising in my voice. "You forged the subcontractor connections. That's how you convinced the restaurant board to bring in Bennett Group." I looked to Lucas, my voice steady but low enough to keep the room from hearing more than a murmur. "They weren't just stealing money. They were laundering influence." Sabrina covered her face with her hands and let out a quiet sob. "I never meant for this to happen," she whimpered. "I was just trying to help." Lucas's voice cut across hers like steel. "You were helping yourself." I turned slightly, finally addressing the room. Not with a shout. Not with anger. Just truth. "To our guests," I said clearly, raising my voice just enough, "we sincerely apologize for the interruption. But sometimes, betrayal refuses to stay silent. And tonight, truth is being served before dessert." A ripple of whispers and low gasps passed through the dining room. Ryan stood up, nearly knocking over his glass of wine. "This is slander," he spat. "You can't accuse us like this. None of this will hold up. You'll ruin yourselves trying to take us down." I rose too, slowly. Straightened my dress. Adjusted the pin in my hair, the snowflake-shaped clip he gave me so long ago, back when I believed in his promises. And then I reached out and unclasped the bracelet from Sabrina's wrist, my grandmother's bracelet. I didn't ask permission. "I'm not ruining anything," I said, my voice calm but razor-sharp. "I'm reclaiming what's mine." The weight of it in my palm felt like closing a wound that had been left open too long. "And Ryan," I added as I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, "don't worry about explaining anything to me ever again. You'll have plenty of time to explain to the auditors, the board, and the DA." Ryan's face twisted with disbelief, like he still couldn't process how far the evening had turned. He'd walked in thinking he had every advantage. That I would cry. That I would disappear. Instead, I was standing here, calm, unbroken, with the proof. And the crowd? They were no longer pretending not to watch. Phones were out. Videos were being recorded. Some people were whispering names, mine, his. Some recognizing Ryan from the news. Some just waiting to upload this train wreck before dessert even hit the table. Sabrina tried to say something, reaching for Lucas. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let them take me in. I didn't know he was using me." Lucas didn't even flinch. "You knew. You just didn't care. You had a choice." A loud voice cut across the tension. "Is there a problem here?" One of the restaurant's off-duty officers who worked our events on rotation had approached. Officer Daniels. He knew me. Had eaten at Blue Orchard with his wife last month. "Not a problem," I said coolly. "Just some guests who may need to stay seated until the authorities arrive. We've got fraud, possible campaign violations, and property theft." Daniels blinked, then nodded slowly. "Understood." He didn't ask for details. He just walked off to make a call. Calm, steady, and used to seeing the rich and polished fall harder than anyone. Ryan slumped back into his seat. He looked around, at the guests recording, at the security, at Sabrina, who now looked like she wanted to disappear under the table. And then his shoulders sagged. The mask finally cracked. He looked up at me, and for the first time that night, he looked like someone who understood he had lost. "Elena," he murmured. "Don't do this. I can fix it. Just give me a chance." I stared at him for a long moment. "No," I said. "You had your chance. Every single day you walked past me while planning this. Every time you touched her hand while I stayed up running your campaign numbers. Every moment you convinced me to trust you, while you were stealing everything I loved." My voice dropped, so low only he and Sabrina could hear it. "You buried yourself." I just lit the match. I turned and walked away, Lucas by my side. We didn't look back. The next morning, Boston woke up to whispers and headlines. City Council hopeful tied to financial misconduct at upscale restaurant. Caught on camera, public meltdown exposes alleged embezzlement scandal. Chef Sheryll Carter reclaims restaurant and legacy in viral showdown. My phone didn't stop buzzing. I ignored most of the calls. Journalists, bloggers, even a few old friends who had once vanished when things got hard, now suddenly remembered my number. But I didn't need them. I already had the only thing I wanted, control. By noon, my lawyer had filed an emergency injunction to freeze Ryan's campaign accounts and request access to all joint assets until the fraud investigation concluded. Lucas's legal team was even faster. They submitted charges of embezzlement and unauthorized use of company funds against Sabrina, backed with digital logs, audio recordings, and paper trails. Ryan's name was being quietly removed from public donor circles. His face? No longer on City Hall's short list for the next great candidate. His phone calls? Mostly ignored by the very same people who once toasted champagne at our anniversary parties. And Sabrina, well. Lucas's family was old Boston money. Discretion used to be their game, but betrayal had a way of bringing the full force of legacy down like a hammer. Her office access was revoked within hours. Board members issued a joint statement. Her name became synonymous with disgrace in every corridor of the Bennett Group. But I wasn't smiling. Not yet. Because beneath the headlines and legal forms was still the raw ache of what they'd done, not just to our reputations, but to our memories. Our families. Our futures. That night, I walked into Blue Orchard quietly. No fanfare. Just the steady rhythm of knives against cutting boards, the hiss of seared scallops in a pan, and the murmurs of my staff preparing for another sold-out evening. Nick met me near the back line, his apron dusted with flour. "You sure you're okay to be in tonight?" I nodded. "I need to be." He gave a short nod, then reached beneath the bar and handed me something small, delicate. It was the photo I had framed behind the bar a few years ago. A black and white snapshot of my grandmother, Lucille, standing beside my mother outside the bakery they once owned. Her smile fierce. Her shoulders straight. The same bracelet on her wrist. "She would have been proud last night," Nick said simply. I looked at the photo. And for the first time since the night at table 8, I felt the burn of tears. Not because I was broken. Because I had finally stopped apologizing for standing up. The next few days were chaos, but focused chaos. My attorney moved quickly, serving Ryan with formal separation papers and freezing access to anything I hadn't already secured. I bought out his stake in Blue Orchard within a week. I didn't even negotiate, I paid exactly what the stake was worth. Nothing more. Ryan called once, not to apologize, but to beg. He had the audacity to say, "This is all just a misunderstanding, Sheryll. You're blowing things out of proportion. Do you really want to ruin everything over one mistake?" "One mistake?" I repeated, my voice cold. Was it the months of stealing money? The forged documents? Or giving away my grandmother's bracelet like a party favor? Be specific. He paused, then tried a different tactic. "I just want to fix things." I smiled into the phone. "Then start with your lawyer." And I hung up. Lucas and I met again the following Friday, this time not in shared grief, but in quiet resolve. We sat at a cafe across from City Hall, sipping bitter espresso as reporters snapped photos from a distance. He slid a file across the table, one last transfer that had surfaced. $12,000, he said. "Used to book a weekend retreat. Our anniversary weekend." I didn't flinch. I simply replied, "I hope the resort gave them non-refundable rooms." We shared a laugh, and for a moment, just a moment, I let myself breathe. Lucas was never meant to be a partner in revenge. He wasn't a rebound. He was a mirror. A man who had been shattered beside me and chose not to be destroyed. And maybe that's why we understood each other so well. That night, I stood in the center of my restaurant and looked around. I had changed the lighting, slightly softer now. Replaced table 8's centerpiece with a crystal bowl filled with white lilies, my grandmother's favorite. There was a party reservation at that very table. A group of 6 women who were celebrating a promotion. When they entered, I greeted them personally. One of them, in her early 60s, paused and smiled at me. "You're the chef, aren't you? The one from the video?" I hesitated. Then nodded. "That's me." She didn't say anything else, just reached out, gently touched my arm, and said, "Thank you." For what, I didn't ask. I didn't need to. That weekend, our reservations tripled. Social media called Blue Orchard the restaurant where justice is served with dessert. Some mocked it. Others praised it. I didn't care either way. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. Ryan? The last I heard, he relocated to a small town in the Midwest, working part-time in his uncle's insurance office while the city wrapped up its audit. His political career was over before it even began. Sabrina stayed quiet during the whole investigation. She never fought the charges. Her silence said enough. As for me? I bought back the house that Ryan had secretly tried to use as collateral for his campaign loan. With the help of my lawyer and a few documents he stupidly left behind, I not only reclaimed the deed, I made sure his name was erased entirely. And then, I threw a party. Not for the public. Not for the headlines. But for the women in my family, my grandmother's memory, my mother's hard hands, and every piece of myself I thought I lost during that long, quiet collapse. We drank champagne. The real kind this time. And toasted not to revenge, but to return. The court documents arrived on a Tuesday. Thick, cold, clinical. My attorney, Frances Hall, laid them out on the long oak table in her downtown office like she was performing surgery. Her brows were tight, her movements exact. I had seen her in trial once, defending a woman who had been conned by her own siblings. Frances didn't speak in long flourishes. She didn't raise her voice. She just didn't lose. This, she said, tapping one page with a manicured finger, is where it gets dirtier than we thought. I leaned forward. My heart already knew. The pages just confirmed it. Ryan had used my signature. Forged. Sloppy, too. A poor copy from an old real estate form, one I had filled out when we were buying Blue Orchard's second kitchen expansion. But this time, it was affixed to a power of attorney document, giving him limited rights over my grandmother's house. My grandmother's house. The one she'd left to me in her will. The one with the rose garden out front and the oak swing I helped her build when I was 11. The one I had nearly lost during the pandemic, only to claw it back with double shifts and night orders. He'd used it as collateral. For his campaign. This could have cost you everything, Frances said. If you hadn't caught it in time. I nodded slowly. The air in my lungs was thick. He didn't just cheat on me, Frances. He gambled with my bloodline. Frances sat back. The good news? He's done. No lender will touch him after last week. With the fraud investigations and the recordings going public, he's a legal liability. And the house? Already working on a court order to nullify the false document. He'll never touch it again. I stared at the pages for a long time. I didn't feel the pain anymore. Just the insult. All those nights I made excuses for him. He's tired. He's under pressure. He just needs time. And all along, he was signing away the things I protected the most. That night, I went back to the house, Lucille's house, and stood on the front porch for a long time. The swing creaked gently in the wind. The scent of rosemary wafted from the garden. It didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt sacred. So I lit a candle on the porch, something my grandmother used to do whenever a storm passed. And then I went inside. A few days later, a brown envelope arrived at the restaurant. No return address. Just my name, handwritten. Inside was a note. I didn't know it would go this far. Please, Sheryll, I need help. I've lost everything. There was no signature. But I recognized the handwriting. Ryan. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some stories don't deserve a final chapter. They just stop mattering. Instead, I turned my attention to something else, rebuilding. The restaurant needed a fresh launch. The press coverage had brought waves of attention, but attention didn't always mean loyalty. I didn't want to be famous for a viral betrayal. I wanted to be known for what I'd always poured into Blue Orchard: heritage, excellence, passion. I redesigned the menu. Every dish now told a story, but not his story. Mine. Course 1, Lucille's garden: rosemary roasted carrots over white bean puree, garnished with edible rose petals. Course 2, the swing tree: smoked duck with applewood glaze, served on carved wooden boards that resembled the porch swing design. Course 3, nocturne: a black garlic pasta dish I developed during the darkest months of COVID, the one that sold out on Uber Eats when I cooked from my apartment kitchen at 2 a.m. Every plate was a piece of my fight. And customers responded. We were booked out for 2 months by the end of that week. Food critics who once overlooked us now called the menu a triumphant memoir in 6 courses. But more importantly, the team believed again. The kitchen staff held their heads higher. The servers moved with pride. Nick was finally promoted to co-manager. And every time I passed table 8, the lilies reminded me. This wasn't the place Ryan broke me. This was the place I came back to life. Lucas and I kept in touch, not constantly, not clingingly, but when it mattered. He rebuilt his family's company. His board re-elected him as CEO after Sabrina was removed. He told me the day the ink dried on her termination letter, she left without a word. No fight. Just quiet. Guilt, he'd said over the phone. It eats louder than revenge ever could. One night, Lucas stopped by Blue Orchard, not to talk about the past, but to try my new menu. He sat at the bar, like I had once done on the night everything fell apart. I poured him a glass of Veuve Clicquot, the bottle I never opened that night. This time, we both drank. He raised his glass. To endings. I smiled. And better beginnings. We didn't talk about Sabrina or Ryan that night. We didn't need to. We had moved past them. Past the broken promises. Past the manipulations. Past the shadows of people who thought they'd never be caught. Lucas paid his bill, shook my hand, not romantically, not with lingering looks, but with the deep respect of someone who knew what it meant to stand back up when no one expected you to. That was enough. 6 weeks after the night that changed everything, I stood on the stage of the Boston Culinary Excellence Gala with the bracelet glinting on my wrist. They called it the Resilience in Leadership Award, and when my name was announced, the applause that followed was warm, not thunderous like in viral moments, but genuine. Respectful. The kind that sticks to your bones more than any social media comment ever could. As I stepped up to the podium, I looked out into the room of chefs, critics, entrepreneurs, and mentors. Most of them had watched my story unfold through headlines and whispers. But some, the ones who really knew me, had seen my journey long before Ryan Carter's name ever showed up in the papers. I didn't have a speech. I spoke from the truth. Thank you, I said, not for the award, but for reminding me that when you choose to rebuild, people show up to help you steady the foundation. A pause. I almost lost everything, not just my business, but my name, my pride, my family's legacy. But sometimes, losing what you thought mattered most is how you find what actually does. I touched the bracelet lightly. My voice didn't crack. Not anymore. This belonged to my grandmother Lucille. She used to say, hardship isn't what breaks a woman, it's what reveals her. And she was right. That night, the restaurant received more reservations than we could physically seat. But it wasn't the surge in business that humbled me, it was the quiet notes left on receipts from strangers. Thank you for standing up. I watched your story while going through a divorce. You gave me courage. For Lucille. For all of us. My daughter wants to be a chef now. She says you're her favorite. For the first time in a long time, I felt like something inside me had finally healed. But of course, healing doesn't mean the past disappears. 2 days later, I received a certified letter. No return address. No attorney's stamp. Just a single sheet of paper and Ryan's familiar handwriting. You've made your point. I lost everything. But you still owe me. I built Blue Orchard with you. Half of it is mine. If you don't want this to get ugly, let's settle privately. It wasn't desperation. It was delusion. The kind of delusion that makes broken men claw at the ashes they started the fire with, hoping someone will mistake it for a spark. I forwarded it to Frances. She laughed. This man must have slipped and hit his head on entitlement. But I didn't stop there. I scheduled a press release for the following Monday. Chef Sheryll Carter buys historic Beacon Block property for culinary arts mentorship program. I used the money I had saved for a second restaurant location. Instead, I purchased the neighboring building to Blue Orchard, the one Ryan once mocked as a waste of money when I mentioned using it to mentor girls interested in the culinary arts. Now it would become Lucille House, a free, donation-supported program for young women of color to learn culinary techniques, restaurant business operations, and entrepreneurial planning. I even added a quiet clause in the purchase agreement, publicly filed, that listed me as the sole legal owner of Blue Orchard and Lucille House. The language was ironclad, thanks to Francis. It would be entered into the public record and filed under my name, no joint ownership, no partnership history, no co-founder title to Ryan Carter, ever. When the press release hit, the effect was immediate. Articles ran with headlines like, "From Betrayal to Brilliance, Sheryll Carter expands her empire. Culinary queen turns pain into power with new women's program. Lucille's legacy lives on, one dish, one dream at a time." Ryan's attempt at a final blow had backfired beautifully. He called my personal line one last time. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Don't bother threatening me again," I said. "Every time you do, I build something new with it." "You're vindictive," he spat. "You're cold." "No," I said calmly. "I'm clear. There's a difference. After everything we went through. You went through it. I survived it." Click. I turned off that number for good. That evening, Nick brought out a bottle of champagne to celebrate the Lucille House launch. Not the Veuve this time, but a small batch sparkling rose made by a black-owned vineyard I partnered with for the mentorship program. I stood in the center of the kitchen, my kitchen, and looked around. The sounds of knives chopping, pans sizzling, and soft jazz playing overhead felt more alive than ever. I wore the bracelet that night too. But this time, not as armor. As inheritance. At midnight, I walked alone into the Lucille House building for the first time. The keys still warm in my hand. The walls were empty, the space raw, but it didn't matter. I could see it already. Students at the workstations. Photos of the women who raised me lining the walls. My mother. Lucille. Even a picture of me, not in a magazine or next to a headline, but wearing my apron, hands dusted with flour, hair tied up in a messy bun. Proof. Proof that from the worst kind of betrayal, you can rise not just whole, but stronger. Sharper. And ready to open doors for someone else. The grand opening of Lucille House was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. There were no velvet ropes or celebrity chefs flown in for clout. Just the smell of baked brioche, laughter from young women in pressed white aprons, and my grandmother's favorite hymn playing gently in the background. The courtyard was decorated with hanging lights and fresh rosemary from Lucille's original garden, the same strain we'd replanted from her home. It was a full-circle moment. The kind that humbles you more than it exalts you. We hosted 50 guests, family, friends, donors, and future students. Some cried when they toured the space. The front hallway was filled with framed black and white photos of women who'd survived, who'd built, who'd sacrificed, including a photo of Lucille and me in front of the original swing, her hand resting proudly on my shoulder. As the first workshop began, I stood off to the side, letting the girls take up space, watching as a 17-year-old named Bianca carefully showed another student how to hold a knife correctly. I recognized the fire in her eyes, not arrogance, just purpose. A hunger to build something no one could take from her. I was talking to Francis near the punch table when I felt it, a hush behind me. A subtle shift in energy. I turned slowly. Ryan. He stood just outside the open gates of Lucille House. Not inside. Not invited. Just watching. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes, tired. The arrogance was gone. Or maybe tucked away for show. He didn't step forward. He simply raised a hand in the smallest wave. For a second, I stared at him, not with anger. Not with sadness. Just clarity. And I nodded once. That was all. Not because I forgave him. but because he no longer had power over anything I was. He left without a word. Francis watched the exchange. You think he'll ever come back with a new stunt? I shook my head. He won't. And even if he did, this time, I'm not the one who has to fight. I built an army. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the small garden behind Lucille's house. The rosemary bushes swayed in the wind. The porch swing creaked gently. I looked down at my wrist. The bracelet sparkled under the moonlight. It wasn't just jewelry anymore. It was memory. Proof. Testament. I pulled out my phone and started a voice note, something I'd do occasionally now, to capture thoughts for the future students. Dear girl. You will be underestimated. You will be told you're too emotional, too soft, too inexperienced. People you love may betray you. People you trust may walk out. And when that happens, you may feel like your story ends there. But it doesn't. Because there's a kind of power in a woman who rises quietly, not for applause, but for justice. Remember this. You are not defined by who broke you. You are remembered by how you came back. I ended the recording and saved it in a folder marked for them. Because that was the point now. This wasn't just about Ryan. Or revenge. Or even justice. It was about legacy. Mine. Lucille's. And the girls walking through the kitchen doors of Lucille's house every day from here on out, knowing they don't have to wait to be rescued. Because they can rescue themselves. 6 months after the launch of Lucille's house, the first graduating class presented their capstone dishes at Blue Orchard, a new tradition we'd created. The entire staff stood in the back, watching the students take center stage. I wore a simple black dress that night, no press, no interviews. Just quiet pride. And the bracelet. Always the bracelet. Ryan? I heard he moved again. Arizona, maybe. Trying to start over. But now, his name is footnoted in a story that no longer belongs to him. As for me? I don't celebrate that night with sorrow anymore. I celebrate it like a second birthday. Because the night Ryan chose his mistress. I chose champagne, silence, and the long game. And I left him ruined, not with rage. But with resilience. What did I learn? That the strongest women aren't the ones who never break, they're the ones who rise without asking permission. If someone tries to steal your light, let them. Just remember you were born with fire. This is Revenge Echoes, where true stories find their voice. If this story moved you, subscribe for more. Share it with someone who needs to remember what they're worth. And drop a comment below, because sometimes, just being heard is where healing begins.